All right, this is really, really special to have Temple Grandin with us here. I met Temple a number of years ago, and she won the Equine Icon Award. And I told her, gee, I wish we could give it to her again this year, because it's an award for people who have changed the lives of people and animals in immeasurable ways. And it's been really interesting because I've asked a lot of people, do you know who Temple Grandin is? Hey, could you bring it down a little bit back there? A number of people, many people do not know who Temple Grandin is, and many millions of people do know who Temple Grandin is. But Temple Grandin's work, Temple Grandin as an individual, has changed the world for millions of animals and millions of people, and she continues to do that. So having her here again with us here at this conference and film festival means a lot to us, and she means a lot to a lot of people. I want to read a bio, a little background, so that you can really, for those who know her name or know her books, but you may not know the breadth and scope of the work that she has done and the things that she has done to change the world. So forgive me for reading this. Dr. Grandin is world-renowned as an animal scientist, and she grew up here in the United States. She often says that she thinks in pictures, which is different from people without autism. There's a quote that I heard from her recently, and I think it's just such an amazing one. The world needs all kinds of minds, and the world really does need all kinds of minds. Most of Dr. Grandin's career has been spent improving how cattle are handled on farms and ranches, making systems calmer and safer. But her ideas are just as useful when we think about horses. Temple reminds us that animals don't see the world the same way humans do. A shiny puddle, a flapping jacket, or a red Adirondack chair in the wrong place might look like danger to a horse. Horses, as we know, are prey animals, which means they're always on the lookout for threats. What seems silly to us, and we still forget that even as horse people, can feel very real to them. Their focus is two things: safety and comfort, and we'll add love. As Temple explains it, horses have to see the same object from all angles. They don't automatically transfer learning from one side of their brain to the other. For coaches and riders, this matters. If a horse spooks or refuses to do something, it isn't being naughty, as so many trainers and horse people have sometimes said. It's only reacting the way it knows to stay safe. So our job is to slow down, let the horse look, and give it time to learn. She also talks about how animals respond to pressure. A gentle aid released at the right moment helps the horse to understand. But rough hands, loud voices, or constant pushing only build fear. That means showing riders how to be clear but kind, guiding, and not forcing. And this links horse welfare with rider welfare. A calm horse gives the rider confidence. A frightened horse makes the rider nervous. By putting the horse's feelings first, we create safer, happier lessons for both. Temple Grandin may have made her name with cattle, but her lessons about patience, clear signals for animals, are pure gold for anyone who works with horses. When we see the world through the horse's eyes, we become better, kinder horsemen and horsewomen, and maybe kinder, gentler people to all. Temple, come.
It's great to be here. We've got lots of things to talk about today, and some of the same things that I talked about this morning. And one of the most important things, maybe this is going to work, this is to point it right at the computer. Okay, next slide, please. I don't think that's going to work. Next slide. You're going to have to change it from back there. This clicker, is it even on? So I'm pointing, okay. The thing is, you want to understand an animal, you got to get away from language. Any animal. An animal lives in a sensory-based world, not a word-based world. Okay, today if you were at the demonstration, we're going to show how we react to novel chairs. Well, I don't think the chairs we picked out were very novel. Melinda had 3 of them at her house, and Walmart and Costco both sell them. So they probably weren't a very novel object. But the bony pony definitely was a novel object. And I hope what you kind of saw of that is there's an attraction to want to look at it, but it's also scary. New things are both scary and attractive. And you saw a picture there of the horse having a really good time with the ball, but you got to carefully introduce the ball so he's not going to be afraid of it. But get away from words. It's a sensory-based world, not a word-based world. Next slide, please. And here's some interesting research from Cornell University. They did MRIs on dogs, and they found out there's a huge trunk line of nerve fibers going from the olfactory parts of the brain back to the visual cortex. How about smell pictures? Isn't that trippy? Now, a horse being a prey species animal, vision's the dominant sense when it comes to being afraid of stuff. Let's go to the next slide. Language is not required for thought. You know, they're getting a lot of discussion about whether or not animals could think. No, you don't need to have language for thinking. I think in pictures, my memories are sort of like little phone pictures. My mind takes pictures of things that interest me. Then you have the mathematical mind that thinks in patterns. That does not require words. Let's go to the next slide. This is a very interesting book on animal sensory. I want to pick it up from the local bookstore here. You know, an octopus lives in a touch-based world. I see people all the time in the city yank their dog away from the tree that they want to smell. But that's the dog's social life. You're not letting it get the gossip down at the coffee shop. You're just yanking it away from it. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is a young autistic man sent me this picture, old-fashioned movie reels in the head. Now, when I was young, I thought everybody thought in pictures. I didn't know I thought differently. So it was obvious to me to get down in chutes and see what cattle were saying. I didn't know. A lot of other people didn't really think in pictures. I didn't know that till I was in my 30s. Let's go to the next slide. When I was young, I thought everybody thought in pictures. You know how I finally realized that they didn't? I asked a speech therapist, think about a church steeple. How does it come into your mind? And I see specific ones. Then today I asked somebody that question, and they saw a generic steeple, but it was real detailed. This speech therapist just saw 2 lines. Almost no visual thinking. Let's go to the next slide. All right, something new. Something new is both scary and attractive. See how these steers here came up to this box? Well, the chairs that we had today were not very novel, but the horse skeleton definitely was really, really novel. But we got them to finally walk by it. But something novel is attractive if they can voluntarily approach, and it's scary if you shove it in their face. I don't know how many times people have said to me, my horse was fine at home, and he went berserk at the show. And the animals that are most likely to have a problem at the show are animals that have lived kind of sheltered a life. They haven't seen that many different things, so they're more afraid of it. Flags, bikes, and balloons. Okay, Belinda was telling me this morning that her Mustang is afraid of tarps, and he'd probably been sacked out with tarps. Now I want to make sure that he doesn't freak out when he sees a rider with an American flag. Now, maybe it'd be okay when the flag and the horse are together, but what about if the flag's being carried around? So one of the best ways to get them used to the flags would be just to decorate the fence with flags. Let them come up to it. Don't shove it in their face. And an animal that has a flighty temperament gets more scared when they get scared. Higher heart rate, more cortisol. Now you'll see here that some of these cattle are standing back. You get the shy animals and the bold animals. The high fear and the low fear. The low fears come up first. Let's go to the next slide. Yep, chickens like to peck the iPhone right there. That is definitely attraction to novelty. I do consulting for Costco. Those are rotisserie birds right there. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Sudden new things scare both horses and people with autism. I tell parents, no surprises. Okay, let's say we're going to be going on a plane. Well, if the airport lets you practice going through security and those kinds of things, that'd be really good. Surprises scare. They need to know what's going to happen. And you might do a social story that goes, well, and if you have a thunderstorm at the Denver airport, it's very likely maybe the flight be very delayed. That happens all the time. Doesn't always go when it's supposed to. But new things are scary. Let's go to the next slide. Too many dogs lead such a sheltered life. They're just afraid of everything. And that got really, really bad with COVID because everybody just stayed inside. And dogs that were afraid of the veterinarian also were afraid of a lot of new situations. That's why service dog puppies are taken everywhere. And I was talking to Rupert. He says, I got to take these horses everywhere, down to the fire station, set off the siren, all kinds of stuff, so that nothing scares them. Animals that live a sheltered life, they're the worst for getting scared when they go into town. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is where we did a study rotating a play set. We tried to replicate that with some chairs from Costco and Walmart that weren't novel enough. Now, you see how that thing looks different? Well, what my student did when she did this experiment, she put this in an alcove that was in a stable so that when the horses went by it, they only could see one side of it. And you can see how different it looks. And they walked it by it until they no longer reacted. And then when it was rotated, it became a new object. And the bony pony was like totally new no matter what. But you can see how that thing looks different. And we would tend to look at that and go, well, it's just a kid's toy. And I have a paper online. You can find it if you just type in Temple Grandin, horses rotated. And you can find the paper. It's a free download. Let's go to the next slide. Let's look at how umbrellas and tarps look different. And Lerner and Fent found that if you train a horse to tolerate an umbrella going boom, opening like that, that doesn't transfer over to a tarp. You see, because the memory is specific. A specific picture, a specific sound. We were discussing BLM Mustangs, and one of the things that they may be afraid of is the sound of helicopters. That'd be a sound associated with being chased, but it's a sensory-based association. Let's go to the next slide. Look at how shadows change on this cattle chute. Well, so maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning, everything's fine. At 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're balking at the sharp shadows. Let's go to the next slide. Headed straight into the sun. I don't really want to load a horse trailer when the sun is just coming up over the top of the horse trailer. Yeah, headed into the sun. We have a time at the Denver airport on the bypass road where at certain times in the morning you're blinded, and it's gotten so bad that the electronic sign says drive carefully when there's glare. Yeah, there's sometimes we're almost blinded on that road. But I wanted to get you thinking about what is it seeing. Let's go to the next slide. Well, cattle got terrified of that. That was a shadow from an overhead structure that appeared at 2 o'clock. They were not going to walk over that. Let's go to the next slide. Here's just seeing a car through a fence. See, lots of times when you're handling cattle, you might handle them only twice a year in the corrals. And so you park all the cars around there, get reflections off those cars, and then they decide not to go in there. I was talking to a student that was showing his steer at a show. He says, well, I've shown steers for the last 5 years. Everything's been fine. And at the fair this time, my steer freaked out going in the ring. Well, they'd hung a new banner from the ceiling of the arena, the advertising banner. They hadn't been there before, and the steers were freaking out at it. Stuff that we tend to not notice, animals notice. This would explain spooking for no reason. Maybe something was rotated. I was at a dairy conference, and there was a dairyman that, milked his cows from a wheelchair. Everything was fine. He went over to his friend's dairy, goes rolling in there, and the cows freaked. They had never seen a wheelchair before. So that was really scary. Now, if you're doing therapeutic riding, it's very likely that you're going to have wheelchairs. Well, let's just put an empty wheelchair out there and let them just come up to it. Let them look at it. Then you have a person in it, and you move it around slowly. Introduce it slowly. It's very important that first experiences with new things are good first experiences. If the first experience of going into a horse trailer, smashing your head on it, yeah, you're going to have a hard time getting them in there again. Let's say we build a new set of cattle corrals. Let's have the first experience to be getting fed in it. Make first experiences with new things, like a new four-wheeler. Let's make sure that first experience with that is a good first experience. And we can go on to the next slide. Chains hanging down, I've been doing these talks forever, and I still have to talk about beginner stuff, like get rid of the chains hanging down in the facility that are moving. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is down in Australia, and that's why the truck looks so weird. And you got two identical cattle handling facilities, one that worked and one that sometimes worked really badly. They could see the truck there. They could see the truck being loaded. And they go, ugh. And the other facility, they didn't see that. Same design, but one had the truck and the other one didn't. You see, I want to make you be observers for the sensory things out in the environment. Let's go to the next slide. Turns out I got some big visual thinking circuits. Oh, this kind of blew my mind when I saw these slides. Let's go to the next slide. That's another picture of my big visual thinking circuits. We can go on to the next slide. Well, as a visual thinker, I'll tell you what I can't do. I can't do algebra. And then another problem I have is I have problems with remembering long strings of verbal information. If they say, now do this, this, this in a sequence, I have a hard time remembering. So for those of you that work with autistic kids, make pilots checklists for tasks that involve a sequence. Written checklists. And when I was starting my career, I had worked in a dairy, and they had a checklist on the wall on how to set up the milking equipment. That was really important for me, because I don't remember sequence well. Let's go to the next slide. All right, let's develop the different kinds of thinking. I'm what's called an object visualizer, and they've got copies of my book, Visual Thinking, out there, where I provide the scientific research that there's different kinds of thinking exist. Object visualizers, really strong ones, just can't do algebra, but they're going to be super good with animals. And another thing they're going to be super good at is any kind of skilled trade, building things. Boy, if I could change the schools, I would put lots of making stuff back into the elementary grades. Then you have your pattern thinker. This is your music and math person. Music and math go together, and art and mechanical and animals tend to go together. Then you have the verbal thinker. Now, verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize. Let's say we discuss something like how can we make a classroom work for autistic kids? Well, I want to get rid of the LED lights that flicker, and let's use more instructions in a printed pilot's checklist format. Those are two very simple things that you can do. Then you got the dyslexic kid who's an auditory thinker. In fact, right now on my royalty statements, a third of my book sales are audio. Not electronic, but audio books. And there will be books for sale afterwards. And I'm a shameless bookseller. And you might wonder, what do I do with speaking engagement money and book money? I have put 25 master's and PhD students through school, paid for their programs. And I have 3 students that got PhDs and they're professors now. So I'm real happy about that. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this horse was written up in Animals in Translation, and he was terrified of black cowboy hats. He's a Mustang, and they do that freeze branding with alcohol. Well, this idiot threw the alcohol in the horse's face, in his eyes, and he was wearing a black cowboy hat. So this horse got terrified of black hats. White hats were fine, black cowboy hats were scary. See, that's an example of a fear memory, where it's very specific. Now, when I put the hat on the ground, it was less scary. But the closer that hat got to my head, the scarier it got. See, animal thinking is specific. Another kind of, you can also get touch feelings. I've seen horses where, they were abused with a certain type of bit, usually a snaffle, because that's the beginner bit, it's a snaffle. So if someone's going to do rough training, they beat the horse up with a snaffle bit. And you can sometimes remove the snaffle bit and go with a one-piece bit. A jointed bit's going to feel different than a one-piece bit. And I've seen just going to a one-piece bit, and the horse just calmed right down. But think about a feeling picture. jointed bits versus a one-piece bit. And then you got the horse that bucks when you change gaits. Think about it. The saddle feels different at each gait. So what I like to do is have the students put backpack on, and I want you to walk, trot, and canter with the backpack. You know, this is because you were doing the changing gaits too quick, and you got the bucking strap effect. Now, I had a horse when I was in my 20s. I didn't know the things I knew now. He was a beautiful sorrel, and he'd buck when you went from trot to canter. And it was a Western horse. I had a complete set of English tack. I would have switched him over to English, and I would have bought a really weird saddle pad that would feel totally different, and then very carefully had trained him. Probably could have fixed it by making a different feeling picture. Let's go to the next slide. A calm animal is always easier to handle. Like today, a little girl was riding a horse out in the pasture, going over some jumps, and the horse spooked, and he just ran right into our group at full speed. And you get that kind of freak out. It takes 20 to 30 minutes to calm down. So you get a horse that's really spooked, a cat that's crazy, cattle that have gotten really spooked, 20 to 30 minutes to calm down. We had a really dangerous, stupid thing happen at our equine center. A news photographer came in. Adam Dario and I were supposed to ride these two Western horses. I came back from the interview, and the horses were rearing, and I saw that Adam was trying to hold them, the drone up there. Well, the news photographer had taken that drone and just flown right into them. Well, I timed it. It took exactly 20 minutes for them to become rideable. I timed it. You know, it was kind of a bad experiment that the news photographer did. But that's really stupid. If you just take a drone and you park it up in the air, that's fine. But don't come in like a plane for a landing, going right straight into it. Let's go to the next slide. It's important now on reducing fear. I mean, one thing that's going on in the veterinary clinics right now is more fear-free methods. Let's make puppy's first visit really good. We'll feed it treats, give it a non-slip floor to stand on. Yeah, animals start slipping on the floor, they start to panic. Let's go to the next slide. All right, I like to show this at veterinary meetings. We can teach the lion to cooperate during nail trims, and he'll cooperate being fed meatballs right there. And why are we having warfare with dogs over nail trims? You know, let's get puppies used to having their feet handled. Let's go to the next slide. And let's train dogs to being examined. Give them a non-slip mat. They're going to be much easier to handle. Yeah, this is important stuff that we need to be doing. Let's go to the next slide. And there are a lot of dogs turning gray. You know, living in Fort Collins, they got draconian leash laws. You're not allowed to let your dog run around in this field behind the church, and the bike cop's going to get you there. And they're locked up in the house all day, and they're turning gray prematurely. When I was a child, all the dogs ran loose. Now, the bad thing is, lots of car accidents. But I think they had a better life. You didn't have grown-up dogs just eating the house and chewing it all up. Yeah, they don't get to do enough stuff. I was talking to Rupert this morning, and yeah, he says, I don't want these horses to be afraid of anything. You know, we take them to the fire station, we take them to all kinds of places, so nothing gets them scared. Let's go to the next slide. Fear. It's the main emotion in autism. It's also the main emotion for an animal like a horse. Turns out I've got a very big fear center. I've done a lot of experimental brain scan stuff. Let's go to the next slide. Now you can look at, you saw the cattle in that first slide. The bold cattle come right up to the box. The other cattle were standing back. Now the bold mean a low fear. That's a low fear animal, genetically low fear animal. Or you can have a shy dog, that's a high fear animal. You had the same thing in horses. And when they were brought into the animal shelter, the high fear animals were getting sick because they had a poor immune response. Some of that time can go on with horses too. Let's go to the next slide. Animals have emotions. Prozac works on dogs. When you look at how the brain is set up, the main difference between us and horses and other animals is the size of the cortex. We got a big computer on top. But the emotion centers are just about the same. We'll go on to the next slide. There's been some very interesting research done on horse domestication, where there's been some small changes in genetics I call one of them a Prozac gene, more serotonin in the brain, and some other things that changed their back so they didn't tend to get a sore back. Nobody's riding zebras. They're just too hyper. And there's been another paper that just came out on this about a week ago. Let's go to the next slide. These are the core animal emotions, the Jack Panskep emotions. And in my book, Animals Make Us Human, I discuss this research in detail. You have fear, then you have anger, then you have separation anxiety. Separation anxiety is different from fear. Like you take one horse away from the other horses, it doesn't want to be by itself and it's whinnying its head off. That is separation distress. And I don't think people recognize that. I went to the big Keeneland thoroughbred sale just before COVID, about 6 years ago, and they had never trained the horses to tolerate a strange person holding them. Because the Keeneland sale is a very fancy sale. There's no ring fence. They just have a little golden rope, and you don't want to have the horse jumping into the audience, so they have their groom hold him. And then when the regular groom stepped aside, the horse was whinnying its head off. It had never been trained to have a strange person hold you. Yeah, that would be simple. Also, they hadn't been trained to the sound of the loudspeaker, especially the auctioneer sound, and you had, $5 million horses pooping cow pies. They had so much diarrhea. And I don't think they recognized how stressed these animals were. And these are easy things to fix. You can train them to the loudspeaker, and you can train them that strange people holding you is absolutely just fine. And then Rupert was showing those dressage moves. I went to the World Cup 2 years ago. I couldn't believe it on dressage. Air-conditioned basketball arena, and most of the horses were dripping in sweat like you'd taken a water hose and just totally drenched them. Just dripping in sweat. They were stressing the living you-know-what out of them. I don't think they realized it. Then you have seek, or the urge to explore. Some animals are high explorers, and other animals are not. They've taken GPS collars and put them on cattle. You'll probably find this with horses, too. And some will get out and graze a lot of pasture, and others are lazy and they hang around the water hole. Then, of course, you got the sex drive. You got mother-young nurturing. That's the oxytocin system. And then you've got play. Now, genetics affects whether the nervous system is going to be more reactive or less reactive. You really see a genetic difference in a horse when you suddenly show something novel. But also experience matters, because you can take a high-strung horse and carefully expose it to all kinds of different things, and it's going to be just fine. Let's go to the next slide. So both genetics and previous experience has an effect. Now, if you're dealing with a whole lot of rescue animals, you do not know what the handling history is. And we happen to know on the black hat horse what had been done to it. See, sometimes if you can remove the scary thing, okay, a bit I can control. I can control saddles and saddle pads. But I'm not going to be able to show a horse at a Western show. I can't get rid of the black hats. Because some of these very bad fear memories are almost like a PTSD. And they can be very, very hard to completely get rid of. We've got to work on preventing some of these problems. Because I don't think the black hat horse would ever be really safe to show. You can work with them to reduce it. I talked to one girl. Her horse had a really bad fear memory. She says, yep, now he bucks every 1 out of 21 rides. I ended up in the hospital. Yep, they can be very bad, especially on the high-strung horses. And that's why the people that tend to favor rough training methods, they don't like the Arabian horses. Because you rough up those horses, they're going to get PTSD worse. And we're actually allowed now to use the term PTSD in an animal science paper. There was one that came out by Ronaldo Cook 5 years ago on cows that had been traumatized by being attacked by wolves, and it was affecting their reproduction. So what they did is they took cows that had never seen wolves and cows that had been traumatized by wolves, and they brought them to this corral that had barking German shepherds, wolf howl noises, and wolf urine smells. And the ones that had the previous experience, their cortisols were off the chart. The other cows go, well, so what, barking German shepherds? I don't care about that. That's where the experience did make a difference. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, how many of you noticed the puppy's in a brace position? Let's give it a non-slip floor. You know, you go into the vet clinic and they got to work on the horse. Let's make sure they've got that rubber matting or other non-slip floor. You know, we work on getting, you know, young fillies and colts used to having their feet handled, so that's not going to be a problem. But non-slip flooring is really, really important. Animals panic when they start to slip. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is super interesting work. I don't know why this writing is so small. There's something in the system here that doesn't like an Apple computer. It's a stupid computer compatibility things. And they, you know, show the same show somewhere else that doesn't do that to the writing and make it real small. But Gregory Burns at Emory University trained dogs to lay still in the MRI scanner to look at their emotions. And when they smell their favorite person, the reward centers light up. Yeah, they've got emotions. You know, there's some really funny videos online training dogs to lay still in the scanner. Let's go to the next slide. Do animals feel pain? I think it's ridiculous that some people might say a horse doesn't really feel pain. See, the thing about a prey species animal, you do something painful to it, and it might just go start grazing. You see, a prey species animal doesn't want to advertise to the predator that it's hurting. And sheep are the absolute worst for covering it up. But yes, animals do feel pain. They will self-medicate, drink or eat something that tastes really terrible in order to reduce pain. They definitely do feel pain. And there's some very interesting research now with what's called horse grimace scales, where you look at little differences like in how the eye crinkles around here. And it's difficult for people to learn this. This is where an AI program really, really shine. And look at the horse's face and see these very minor things that change. I was just reading a paper the other day, and the computer's more accurate than the people are on this. But it's very subtle things. You see, if a predator was out there, you know, you can say, well, yeah, the horse is grazing. These are subtle things that you have to get up really close to see. But you might, if you want, might want to go onto Google Scholar and look up horse grimace scales. That's what they're called. Let's go to the next slide. What do dogs need? The other thing I have found is people want the magic thing more than they want management. When I first started, I thought I could build a self-managing cattle handling facility. That's complete rubbish. I can build really good cattle handling facilities, but they're not going to be self-managing. And I had a military person call me up, and they were contracting, and they wanted to build a fancy, fancy kennel for the military working dogs. And I said, they're not equipment that you can just put on a shelf. Dogs need to have somebody bring them in every day. The military dogs need to have a soldier come in every day, take them out for 45 minutes of work. Or at the animal shelter, have a volunteer come in, take every dog out for good time, 45 minutes, and then you're not going to have all the frantic barking and stuff. You can build a fancy, fancy shelter. That's not going to fix the problem. You go out and spend $20 million on a shelter, and they're still going to damage their tails and damage their paws. They're not equipment you can put on the shelf. Dogs need people. We've bred dogs, so they need people. This is a study that one of my PhD students did. And the cortisol was lower in the dogs that had funsies with Krista. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a dog park that really worked. It was so nice to not see the kids on the phones. They provided tennis balls, dogs and people having so much fun. But they had one rule: no doggy food brought in and no people food brought in. Cocktails, yes, drinks allowed, but they didn't want it. They didn't want any resource guarding. And this place is in a worthless piece of land under a freeway bridge. You have the cocktails under the freeway bridge. I am not kidding. Next to the freight train track. And the owner told me he had to kick his own dog out because it was too aggressive. You know, there's some people like breeding dogs just to be really aggressive, and it's dangerous. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, do pressure wraps work? This is something where I was involved in this. You know, you put the thunder shirt on. Does it work for the thunderstorm? No, it doesn't work for the thunderstorm. But where it seems to work is for separation distress. The dogs that had the thunder shirt on, they spent less time looking at the door waiting for people to come back, and it reduced the heart rate. And the next slide will show where that idea came from. And in some of my, come on, next slide. And in my earlier autism books, this is my squeezing machine. I had terrible, terrible times with the worst panic attacks. And I built a thing that was like a cattle squeeze chute and to apply pressure to help calm me down, which it did. And it's been cited in the patents for the Thunder shirt. Let's go to the next slide. There's the rear view. I built that all myself. We got to get kids out. We got to get off these computers, and teenage boys can get into the dark web in a really, really bad, really ugly way. No. Get them off the online. They got to be doing lots and lots of more real things. You know, spend an hour on Facebook or Instagram. That's just fine. Then you need to get off of it, and we need to be getting back to doing a whole lot more real things. Because some of these kids are going into very dark and very bad places with some of the darkest, yuckiest stuff that's online. Let's go to the next slide. Here's an interesting paper. Solitary mammals is a model for autism. If you look at the cat family, lions are more social than panthers or leopards. And this genetic crossover with autism. Isn't that interesting? That's the title of the paper. You can find that paper, Solitary Mammals and Autism. You can find the paper. And we've bred dogs to be really friendly. The thing that's weird is normal behavior variation in animals, like temperament in cattle, for example. We did some of the first research on that. In people's related to disorders of the brain. But you see, to build this gigantic computer on top, you got to have lots and lots of stem cells growing really fast. And sometimes they grow messy. Kind of a messy proposition, building a big brain quickly. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go, I don't know what's missing. Then go to the next. The same genes that give humans a large brain, yeah, they're involved with schizophrenia, epilepsy, and brain disorders. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is mainly with cattle, but what I want to get across on this is when you force an animal, it really raises the stress hormones. I mean, let's say you tie a horse up and you just sack it out, and it's freaking out. You're going to put the stress hormones just off the map, where when your animal voluntarily cooperates with you, and we trained antelopes to cooperate with blood draws, then you don't get all that fear stress. Why is that cortisol going up? A lot of that's just fear stress. Dairy cows are lower because dairy cows are trained to come into the milking parlor. And there's been a lot of research done with pigs and dairy cows that animals that are afraid of people have less piglets and they give less milk. The stockmanship matters. Okay, today Rupert was kissing the horse. Okay, now one of the things that does is it changes the attitude, because there's actually been scientific research that shows that people that really like animals and have a positive attitude have more productive animals. There's actual research that shows that in pigs and in dairy cows. And if you want to look up some of that research, you can go look up a guy named P.H. Hemsworth, Paul H. Hemsworth. H is in hotel, E-M-S, Hemsworth. He's got a whole bunch of papers on dairy cows and pigs. Really interesting. You see, people want a magic thing. Okay, we're going to get a magic halter or bridle or something. No. Rather than just doing the what I call the management part. Let's go to the next slide. And there's the antelopes that we trained to go in this box. We made it really low tech and using operant conditioning. But there was a very long habituation phase where we had to train them to sliding doors opening. So the first day, I opened the door up an inch and they orient. That's all we did that day. Next day, it was 2 inches. At the end of 10 days, you could jerk the door open. But if you'd just gone in there and jerked the door open, they would have freaked. So you had to go through this very slow habituation. This is an animal that has a hair trigger fear response. Nobody thought we could train them. We trained them. And now everybody's doing it. Let's go to the next slide. All right, stockmanship. Pigs are easier to move when they get acclimatized to walking on different kinds of flooring. You get animals used to moving through the chutes, better reproductive performance. There's a whole bunch of interesting studies that show that stockmanship matters. And unfortunately, there's no comparable studies in horses. One of the things that's a big problem on horse research, and I've got a lot of students interested in it, is getting enough horses that have the same handling background. So I'm controlling for the environmental factors. So you got a little study with an N of 6 horses per treatment, something like that. Well, there was a very nice study done by Katie Peters in our department where they compared therapeutic riding, then taking the kids, autistic kids, out in a beautiful park garden that we have, or weightless control. Now, the horses were definitely the best, but the garden was much better than weightless control. It was like halfway in between. So if you don't have horses, we'll take them out in nature and start showing them birds and stuff. You know, that's better than a weightless control. Because right now, as I travel around, I'm finding a lot of autistic kids, 3 years old, no speech, 2-year wait list. This is absolutely unconscionable. Yep, we got to get the retirees out there working with these kids. And we're going to call it church play or library play. Now, one thing, but that's what we need to be doing. Because letting a 3-year-old vegetate on a phone for 2 years is absolutely the worst thing you can do. And now these kids get hypnotized by phones. It just makes, it's awful. I've seen it at the airport. Every window shade is down on this dreary plane, and you've got kids not looking out the window. No, kids should be looking out the window of planes. Look at what it looks like to be up above the clouds. I remember my first flight. I thought that was really cool. Now, if I get an aisle seat, I open the window shade up. Sometimes it stays open, sometimes it doesn't. Let's go to the next slide. Make sure that first experience with something new is a good first experience. That's a basic principle with any animal. New person, a flag, a four-wheeler, a horse trailer, you know, whatever. And then get them used to going to different arenas so that something that might be slightly different in some other arena isn't scaring them. Let's go to the next slide. And the other thing interesting about the novel object, and the bony pony definitely was a novel object, they were often less afraid if they had a familiar person with them. There was a very bad situation that happened in a feed yard. They had a horse that had been in a roping accident. So anything that touched it on the rear end, it would panic. Well, if you feed Holstein cattle love to go up and lick a horse's rear end. Now, if this horse had his familiar rider, they could kind of keep him calm, he was fine. But that rider went on vacation, they let somebody else ride him, and the cows licked his butt, and he crashed into the fence. You know, usually at the veterinary clinic, having the owner present improves things. Now, a lot of this stuff I'm telling you is going to be true on horses. The problem is there's just not much research on the horses. See, the advantage you've got with cows and pigs is I can get a whole lot of cows and pigs that all have the same environment. Let's go to the next slide. Dogs make categories. When I'm on the leash, I protect. Off the leash, I'm your buddy. Okay, with a service dog, when the vest is on, I'm your buddy. I had an interesting, cute experience at the Denver airport yesterday. I was behind a guy that had a service dog, a little lab, looked pretty young. And they make you take all the clothes off, the vest, the leash, everything. The dog's got to be naked when it goes through the metal detector. And this cute little lab knew that his master had to go through first, then he'd go through. So this dog's learning when you go by this weird machine with this weird table and a box and this weird doorway thing, then you have to go through after the master. So we got through on the other side. The guy hadn't picked up the leash and the vest yet. I asked if I could pet it, and he said yes. And this little dog got all wiggly. It did a playing all around. It was so cute. And then the master says, "Sit." Well, then I backed off. I don't want to mess up his training. It's really important that he had a good sit command. So I just backed off, and then his stuff had come through the X-ray machine, and they put the equipment back on. Yeah, but they used to just let him go through with the stuff on him. Nope, you have to take all the stuff off now. I've seen that quite a few times, but he was just the cutest. The vest was off, everything was off. Okay, we can play now, because you don't go through airport security every day. So let's go to the next slide, please. Animals make categories. Yeah, my mind, being a visual thinker, I make categories. So when I was a little kid, how did I learn that a dog wasn't a cat? We only had big dogs in our neighborhood, so I sorted them by size. And then our next-door neighbors bought a dachshund. And I remember studying the dachshund and trying to figure out why she wasn't a cat. She barked like a dog, smelled like a dog, and she had the same nose shape as a dog. Let's go to the next slide. All my thinking uses specific examples to create concepts. It's bottom-up thinking. Verbal thinking is very top-down. Oh, we'll have to do a better job of teaching autistic kids in the schools. You see, that's very, very, very vague. But what I'll do is say, okay, let's get rid of LED lights that flicker. Let's do more, checklist type of instructions. And then we've got to get bullying under control. And one thing that was done with me in elementary school is my teacher told the other children that I had a handicap that wasn't visible like a wheelchair. So I managed to get through elementary school without being bullied. And I have a paper you might want to look up. It's called How Horses Help the Teenager with Autism Make Friends and Learn How to Work. Because when I got into high school, after getting kicked out of 9th grade for throwing a book, a big high school didn't work for me. I went to a special school. I had friends through horseback riding and showing. I actually showed in a small open show. And they put me to work cleaning the stalls and running the horse barn. And I learned how to work. And I made up the academics later on. But when I was a teenager, horses were my total life. They were the one place where I had friends, and I also learned work skills. And too many autistic kids are not learning shopping, they're not learning work skills. Let's go to the next slide. Bottom-up thinking. Animals do it, people do it. ChatGPT and Claude do it too. Yep. Let's go to the next slide. All right, now I'm going to do a little bit of cattle handling stuff. And people have asked me, how did you manage to do things to really help change things? One of the things I did is I did a lot of writing. I'd write articles. Okay, you've got the flight zone here. Hopefully in a tame horse you don't have a flight zone anymore. But in the livestock animals, you're going to have flight zone. And I would write articles just explaining how this worked. Write lots of articles, how to do things. Just lots and lots of articles. And there's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up to the editor of our State Farm magazine, and I start writing for the State Farm magazine. That really helped my career. Okay, a lot of the things you showed in these movies are really good things. Write about it. A lot of practical how-to articles. In the horse magazines, put podcasts out there. You put up websites with lots of information on them. Yes, and don't make people log in. Don't make a paywall come up. I just put the stuff out here. And some of the basic stuff I put out there was explaining things like the flight zone with cattle and shape. Now, what affects that flight zone? Genetics and amount of contact with people. And these were Australian shape. Not much contact with people, so they had a big flight zone. Let's go to the next slide. You enter the flight zone, they move away. And then just as Rupert was saying this morning, the reward is you stop pushing on the flight zone. You don't ask the horse to do the extra step. Does a little bit of what you want, back off. That's the reward. These cattle start to move for me, then back off. But then I got the white one there, and he is turning and looking. Yeah, that's a natural behavior. There's the flight zone, and there's another zone there where they want to look at you. Horses, Mustangs out on pasture, they do exactly the same thing. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is a handy-dandy way to get animals to move forward in a chute. It works just fine with Mustangs, too, when they have to be worked in the chute to get their feet trimmed. And you quickly walk back by them. But what people do that's wrong all the time is they'll stand at the head of one of these animals and take a flag and poke its butt. I still have to train people not to do that. We still have to train people in just basics. No, I have a website that has all these basics. Yes, I sell lots of books, but I also have a website with lots of information I give away. I paid a lot. I spend money to make my papers open access to get information out there and try to get out of the silos and get out communicating with other people. Let's go to the next slide. And I had a really nice portfolio. Everything was black and white back in the 70s. And the way I sold jobs, since I was kind of weird, was just showing off pictures of my work. Let's go to the next slide. Well, there's one of my drawings. And I sold big projects, within beef. I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant in North America. I think that's pretty good for somebody who thought was stupid. And a really big thing that motivated me is I wanted to prove I wasn't stupid. Now, and the reason that's curved is as they come on around the bend, they have a natural behavior to go back to where they come from. Let's go to the next slide. And that was one of the pictures they got sent. Showed off the work. Well, the other thing I learned is that if I was want to sell a job to a ranch, I needed to show them pictures of ranch corrals. They wouldn't be interested in packing plant stuff. Let's go to the next slide. Non-slip flooring, that's so important. Now, how many of you saw that steer was looking at the sunbeam? That's the kind of stuff I want you to see. He's looking right at the sunbeam. Well, 2 hours later, that won't be there. Yeah, that interfered with handling. Let's go to the next slide. Measuring. I get asked what I'm the most proud of. I designed a lot of equipment. I had it out in the beef plants. Half my clients tore stuff up and wrecked it. People thought they could buy the magic thing. And then in 1999, I trained McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's how to use a very simple scoring system I developed. And you have to figure out what are the really important things to measure. It's kind of like traffic. If I could measure only 5 things for traffic, I'd measure drunken driving, speeding, stopping violations, seat belts, and I can pull phone logs and find out you were texting. Those are the things I would measure. That's the stuff I would enforce. Let's go to the next slide. Well, this is a measurement of cattle handling at feed yards. They measure prod use, vocalization during handling, falling, running. You see, and these are actually good scores. Oh, the prod use used to be 500%. Overall, cattle handling's improved. But getting people to measure things, because the problem is you can slip back into some old bad practices and not realize it. Let's go to the next slide. Well, that really got messed up. Oh, we got some computer compatibility problems here. But when you have a big customer inspecting a supplier, that's when you really get changes. I spend most of my time now, that's consulting time, with people that buy meat, because that's where I can get the big change. At first, I would train the employees, managers would untrain them for me. Well, I've got one plant right now, a brand new startup. It's going on right now. It's going terrible. The plant manager is a complete jerk. And when we did this change, we had 74 plants on the McDonald's approved supplier list. Only 3 had to buy expensive things. I bent over backwards not to sell them equipment. I did reverse conflict of interest. And we had to do 3 managerectomies. And after we got rid of the plant manager, things really changed. You want to really do something innovative, your boss has to be behind it if you're working in a big company. Let's go to the next slide. This is the original temperament research that I did when I first came to CSU in the early 90s. And basically an animal this is cattle, scored a 4. This is an animal went crazy when you put in the squeeze chute. They had lower weight gains. 30 years ago, this was radical stuff. It's now commonplace today. Let's go to the next slide. And the other thing is, little people innovate. You know, you've done some innovative things. What you got to start doing is we got to get it out to more people. Right in the mainline horse magazines. You know, doing some research, putting up podcasts and blogs without paywalls. Just get it out there. I had a website up when the internet first started. Yeah, and just put information on there on how to handle cattle, just how-to things. You know, how do you do some of this training? I know there's certain horses that might bite I wouldn't want to do some of this therapy with. Absolutely not. You know, warn people on stuff like that. I'm getting very concerned right now about genetics, selecting Arabian horses with extreme dish faces that look like seahorses, race horses where the legs just snap because they've been selected for speed. I've got big problems with that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's another little thing. I see people doing this horse. They go like this to their horse, the horse show. That's hitting it. Stroke it. Stroke it. Go like this up on the withers. But no, they're slapping that horse and they're trying to reward it. That's not rewarding. Stroke it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, just for cattle welfare, here's some critical control points. What are the important things to measure? And on neglect, you'll be looking at some of these same things. Sores and lesions on the legs, lameness, They're filthy dirty. They're skinny. They've got, inside some building is just reeking of ammonia. These are things that you'd score similar things on horses. And these are what I call the critical control points. You see, because the thing I've learned on training people on how to evaluate animal welfare, if it's not simple, they can't do it. And I have a paper I did, it's called the Practical Application, the 5 Domains of Animal Welfare for Food Animal Supply Chain Managers. And I've trained a lot of auditors. And you got to make it really simple, or they can't do it. Let's go to the next slide. All right, lots of different things can make them lame. But if I'm going out there just to assess it, I'm going to just assess them as lame. It's up to the veterinarians to figure out this other stuff. Let's go to the next slide. Leg conformation, we've got some big problems with that in cattle and pigs right now. I like to look at least in a food animal, like to look at genetics like a national budget. If I put everything into the economy, meat, milk, or eggs, I shortchange the infrastructure, the skeleton, the heart, the reproduction. You've got dairy cows that can't hardly breed. I also shortchange the military, which is the immune function. Everything requires energy. And the animal's a country. When I'm doing breeding, I'll select for the economy, the infrastructure, and the military. Let's go to the next slide. There's a steer so post-legged it's not going to be able to walk. Let's go to the next slide. There's a pig with a really bad foot. That's genetic. Oh, there's certain genetic lines of pigs that got these awful feet and they're all lame. We shouldn't be breeding that. Let's go to the next slide. Now that's a crooked claw in cattle. That's gotten worse, just breeding for rapid growth. See, because a lot of the cattle that we've got now are really heavy, but they're a 2-year-old, where 25 years ago they were a 3-year-old. And you've got the same problem with these very young horses getting started too soon. It's not given a chance to grow up. Let's go to the next slide. There's a hideous crossed claw on a 4-month-old red Angus heifer. She's on the tilt table. That's not foundered. That's genetic. She's a 4-month-old red Angus heifer. She's never touched any grain. Let's go to the next slide. Let's look at how genetic traits can be linked in really, really weird ways. Let belly-ass foxes be a warning. This was research done back in the 60s and 70s. Well, they wanted to breed a fur fox that wouldn't bite your hand off. Now, you see how lean and lanky and snarly he is? Well, after about 20 generations, I'll show you what he turned into. He turned into the next slide shows a nice, tame, stocky border collie fox. Now, who would have thought that coat color would be related to temperament? But it was. Traits are linked. Let's go to the next slide. All right, here's something really weird. I went to a lab animal meeting, and you can buy all these weird mice that have all kinds of stuff wrong with them for cancer studies, for immunodeficient mice. And you can see there all the different phenotypes. You got little black ones, you got regular white ones, you got this naked one, you got a big one that looks like a rat. And they were just bred for different immunodeficiencies. Traits are linked. Let's go to the next slide. And then deer, the farm deer, they're a lot tamer now than they were 30 years ago, but they got lousy leg conformation. Let's go to the next slide. Let's look at what we've done to the bulldog. That's what it used to look like. And I'm just about done, and we'll do questions. Let's go to the next slide. How do we get to this deformed monstrosity? Can't breathe, it can't walk. It's a deformed monstrosity. I'm going to bash the pets just as much as I bash the food animals. Let's go to the next slide. That's what a bulldog used to look like. What if they had just used this 1938 picture? If you want to look this picture up, you just type bulldog's dilemma into Google. You can find this picture. But that's a functional dog. Let's go to the next slide. Here's 2 little pugs. Black ones, bored flats. Had the surgery, very invasive surgery. Oh, man, cut all the flab out of the throat, ream out the nostrils. I saw a video of that surgery. It was just awful. Only half works. But you make a pug just a little less extreme, then it's fine. Then it's fine. I think we have to be looking at a lot of things. I'm not saying get rid of pugs. Just breed them less extreme. Let's go to the next slide. That just makes me sick. That makes me sick. And these are horses bred for halter class. I think this is just disgusting. And you can go on Google Images. type in extreme Arabian horse into Google Images. Get ready to throw up. I've got a big problem with this. We're just about done with the slides. Let's go to the next slide. You know, let's look at welfare. We got to prevent suffering. That's essential. Okay, somebody neglects a bunch of horses and their feet are all grown out and they're skinny. But then, does the animal have time for some fun, for some positive things? You want to see a cow having fun? Look at dairy cows using motorized grooming brushes. They just love them. Just love them. I'm not supposed to say dairy cows love these brushes, but they love them. You can look them up online. They're the funniest videos. We got to prevent suffering. But you take a stallion and you just make him a nut job because you lock it up in a stall, and you can't even ride it as a regular horse. See, animals reared alone often will be very nasty about fighting. They haven't learned the give and take of social relationships. Let's go to the next slide. Well, I've seen our horses. We have horses in Denver, and they are living in Denver. We can't let them loose in Denver, but we let them out in the arena 2 at a time, and they like to have a real fun time with the ball. No, I think the horse is having a good time. But again, you have to introduce this ball carefully, because if you scare them with it, first time you introduce it, they're never going to play with it. Let's go to the next slide. And there are some of my books. And I'm going to sit down now for questions, because my back is killing after standing all this morning. And we're going to do a few questions. And then I got lots of books out there. And in Animals Make Us Human, I talk about how all about the animal emotions. And in Animals in Translation, I talk about how being a visual thinker and being autistic helped me understand animals. And then I've got my visual thinking book, where I present the research for the different kinds of minds. And I've got two different cattle handling books out there. So, okay, let's just pick out somebody that might have a question. Maybe I need to pick somebody. Okay, right there.
I'm wondering, did you get into the cattle work because you were trying to solve an industrial problem, or were you trying to be more compassionate to the cattle?
Well, I just wanted to improve the cattle handling. When I first started out in Arizona, the cattle in the large feed yards actually had pretty decent living conditions. The handling was absolutely atrocious. And I wanted to improve the cattle handling. You see, and that was something specific. And then I got a chance to design some facilities, gradually build up my business. One of the mistakes I made early on is I thought I could make a self-managing cattle handling facility. People think they can get the technology or the thing that's going to solve all their problems. No, I wanted to improve the cattle handling. The other thing is you're going to be a lot more effective if you go and try to work on one thing. Like right now, I want to see young students get into good things. And how do we get out of the silos and talk across the silos? You know, this is something, okay, there's some very good videos. I think some of them need to be shortened so that they'll, you can have the director's cut that's long, but have a shorter one that'll fit in an hour-long time slot on a show. I spent more time transferring technology than I did inventing it. And I spent a lot of time writing just how to do things. I wrote articles on how to lay out handling facilities and design them. How to do something in therapeutic writing. You just write about how to do it. That's the kind of stuff we need to get out and do. Okay.
Over here? Temple?
Okay, I can't see the projectors right in my eye. Okay.
Here.
Hi.
All
Hi,
right.
Temple. Thank you. So I had a question. Sorry, I'm super anxious in public. But you were talking about your solitary model for autism. But I was wondering if social animals can also have it, because I personally know a horse that I obviously can't diagnose this, but I think that if there was horse autism, he might be on the spectrum. And I was
Well, the thing
wondering-
is, some horses, you lock horses up in stalls and it'll make them crazy.
Oh, no, he's not locked up in a stall. I think that he's had a pretty free life. And I was wondering if you think that social animals can also develop it?
Well, you can get an animal that, you see, autism in its mildest forms. When does geek become, or nerd, become autistic? No, I mean, seriously. I'm
a
serious
nerd,
about
yes,
that
thank you.
true continuous trait.
Yeah.
You see, an animal or a
Okay.
person can be more social or less social. The lion as a species is more social than the panther or the leopard or the
Right.
cheetah.
Yeah,
And so that's just normal variation there.
right.
You see, especially on the mild end of it. Then you've got very severe autism, where in some cases they're getting the autism diagnosis to obtain services. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff wrong, and it's probably not even the correct primary diagnosis.
Okay.
One of the big problems I'm seeing with autistic kids, especially the fully verbal ones, they're not learning skills. The parents do everything for them. And then I suggest to the parent that the next time you go to the gas station and you're putting gas in the car, give the kid a $5 bill and have him go in the shop. And one mom says, I don't know if I have the guts to do that. I was shopping when I was 8 years old. You know, there's a lot of good stuff here. It's too bad we didn't contact the schools and get some other non-horse people out here that'd be interested. See, that'd be going across the silos. This is where we got to break out of the silos. And that's something that I did. And going across the disciplines isn't easy. Like I've got a book out there called the Grandin Papers. That's all my best academic articles. It's real heavy on cattle. And then a little forward why I picked it out. Now, I've always tried to make my articles accessible and readable. And then some academics have criticized that. But we've got to get better at communicating and going across the silos. You know, it would have been good if it contacted some of the local autism societies and had them come to some of these movies. You see, that'd be an example of getting out of the silos. This is, I make a point in my talks that I accept of doing a whole wide variety of things, from Bechtel construction to the Precast Concrete Association. So I still love that stuff. I'm doing women in construction, then just a regular autism meeting, then I did this horse meeting, then I do a regular cattle meeting. I like this real variety because I'm trying to break the silos down. That's what we need to be doing.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Get involved with a county agent that do 4-H, you know, setting up, working with them that are doing the 4-H youth horse show things. That was a very big thing. It was very important for me. I was 4-H showing horses. That was my life when I was 16 years old. And our school actually had us in a little open show.
Campbell, we have a question over here.
Okay, I can't see it, so.
This side. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Temple. I'm curious, a couple times in your talk, just to paraphrase, you kind of mentioned how people are kind of zombified by technology and just like very detached from the material world we're living in. And I'm wondering if you think that has an impact on our ability to connect with and maintain
Well, we got to get the
compassion.
kids off the phones.
Yeah.
Oh, we have got to
Absolutely.
do that. I got to sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
I remember the first TVs. I'm old enough to remember the first TVs. This old lady's got to sit down. But TV was limited to 1 hour a day. Just doing junk on phones, Facebook, okay, that's the mild stuff. 1 hour a day. And these kids are going into some very bad places and very dark places online and ending up doing really, really super atrocious things. No, we got to get off the phones, get off of a lot of the online stuff. We got to get back to doing real things. That's what we need to be doing. You see, when I was brought up, my TV shows were Lassie and the Lone Ranger. So you had very clear guidance about what was good and bad. Well, they're not getting that today. You know, I go on a plane and I saw a 2-year-old kid in a stroller glued to a phone when we were on the electric train going out to the gates. That's not good. No, we got to get out doing a lot more things with real things, and COVID just made everything worse. I'm also seeing a lot of problems with the younger students today. They get into trouble in the class. They don't ask for help. They don't want to call up on the phone. You know what really helped me? And Bill Gates, it's now official, Bill Gates is autistic. We had to sell stuff for charity when we were 9 years old. That taught you how to talk to people. When the parents had a party, you had to dress up in your good clothes and you had to be little hosts and hostesses and greet people. That's why I had the guts to go up and get the editor's card. That really helped my career. But writing is getting information out there, writing in varieties of different places. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'll be up there to sign books and talk to people.
Hi. You talk a lot about equine therapy and autism, but do you feel like equine therapy can also help?
I can't hear you. Just come up to the front. Yeah,
I'm sorry. So you talk about a lot about equine therapy and autism.
Yeah, equine therapy is really good. But the other thing that was good about Katie Peters' study is taking the kid out in the park, basically. We have a park-like garden place. Also, wasn't quite as good as the horses, but it was still good, and it was a lot better than the weightless control. And that's what I liked about that study.
Right.
Because the garden definitely had some efficacy.
Right. But
weightless control was the worst.
Do you feel it could also help with children with other mental illnesses?
Oh,
such
absolutely.
As bipolar, depression.
All of that stuff is going to help. We got to get out and do things. You know what they're doing in some countries where they don't have any services, they do what they call activation therapy. So if somebody likes cats, get them to volunteer at the cat shelter. In other words, get them out of the house and doing something they have an interest in. You know, this is what we got to be doing. You're doing a lot more. I looked at that fancy Elks Lodge there. They said nothing's going on there. You know, we don't do bowling leagues anymore. And then I get on a plane, and every window shade's down on the plane. Everybody's glued to their devices. Just the other day, I sat next to a lady, and she started to watch a movie I knew was going to be nasty, and she turned the iPad away, so I couldn't see it. Well, I'm glad she did that because I didn't really want to see it. But she made a point of holding the iPad so I could not see it. She was watching something really nasty with knives. This was just the other day on a flight on an iPad. I was in the middle seat, and she was in the window, and she had the shade down. Now, when we go out the book table, I can show you a beautiful picture I did of an airplane wing sunrise. When you get a really crappy window seat in the back of the plane, you can get really cool pictures of the wing during sunrise. That's what I did on a flight like in row 23 or something like that. I was back behind the wing. Okay, we're going to end up with that, and I want to thank everybody for coming.